in the daily basis, so many people deal with overwhelm because they just believe there's so many things they need to control, where the truth is there's only two things, like you said, your focus. So where's your mind directed in the present moment? And then your choices, what are you doing in the present moment?
That was mental performance coach Brandon Epstein talking about the only two things that we can control, what you focus on and the choices you make. I actually came across Brandon a while back when Sean Brady was on the Joe Rogan podcast. He was talking about his experience working with Brandon, and also he's the mental performance coach for Vayner Sports. And I'm a Gary Vee fan, and I listen to a lot of his podcasts. So I've come across him a couple of times. And when his team reached out for the podcast, I thought we'd have a really good chat. And in today's podcast, we go through and talk about a lot of different things that can help you break through potential mind blocks or mental blocks that you have with your fitness, with your weight loss, with your business, with your relationships, just life in general. We talk about a story about losing 50 pounds and finding that fitness lifestyle, the importance of clear outcomes and specific timeline for goals, why we self-medicate with food, exercise, drugs, alcohol, how to stop overthinking and get feeling and what's going on in your body, deleting, distorting and generalizing, how we can move through the world and some of the biases that can potentially sabotage us when it comes to our belief systems, and getting over that scarcity and lack mindset so that you can get into great shape, you can get the business you want, you can get the relationship you want. A lot of crossover here when it comes to the tools that Brandon gives, a lot of them from his book Program to Fail, how to break through your mental blocks and achieve greatness. So without further ado, here is today's episode. Without further ado, today's podcast is sponsored by and brought to you by my BKF online program, my coaching program. In this episode, we talk a lot about weight loss, about fat loss, and give examples of busy mums. And again, would be perfect to sponsor this podcast because I work with a lot of busy mums in that program. For those of you looking to lose weight, tone up, build muscle, etc. You don't have to be a busy mom. You can be single, you can have no children, you can be male, you can want to build muscle. It's my coaching program, but the details for that are in the link below for the sponsorship for today's episode. So you can just click on through and get details for it. So now, without further ado, here is mental performance coach Brandon Epstein on weight loss mindset, creating a fitness identity, and rewiring your focus to get what you want. Enjoy. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the podcast. I'm delighted to be joined today with my guest, Brandon Epstein. Brandon is a world-class mental performance coach with over 15 years of experience coaching professional athletes, entrepreneurs and executives. His journey includes creating an online fitness community that united over 1 million people, and his fitness videos have amassed over 100 million views, and he's the author of the book Program to Fail, how to break through your mental blocks and achieve greatness. He now dedicates his time fully to mental coaching, which we'll be unpacking in today's podcast. I'm looking forward to talking all things fitness, mental performance and mindset in today's show. Brandon, welcome to the podcast.
My brother, so grateful to be here. So grateful for your listeners taking the time out of their day to listen to this. Bro, let's crush it for them. I'm ready for it.
Brandon, I want to jump off with your backstory, kind of what got you into fitness initially, because you were 50 pounds overweight, you were battling hypertension, and you know the challenges firsthand of physical health challenges that people have. Talk to us a little bit about your own weight loss journey and fitness journey to kick us off, and we'll use that as the catalyst for the rest of the podcast.
Yeah, no doubt, man. Maybe a little bit different than some of your listeners. I purposely got myself overweight because I was playing American football, and so playing the position I was in, the goal was to get as big as possible. And so I did that, I got up to, I don't know exactly what it is in kilos, but almost 250 pounds. And at this point, I went in for like my physical to be able to play, and, I was hypertensive, and I was like, oh shit, like this being overweight thing, getting as big as possible, like this is having some repercussions to my overall health. And so I kind of put that in the back of my head, but I was 18 years old, I was a meathead, I was like, doesn't matter, let's go, more gains, get bigger. And so my journey was really, once I stopped playing football, I'd ask myself, okay, like what kind of health do I want to have as an adult moving forward? And that really is what kickstarted my own personal fitness journey, and then really understanding the mental aspect of losing weight, keeping it off, and creating those, consistent routines that make it feel enjoyable and sustainable.
When you lost the weight initially, because obviously having that sports background, you have a lot of discipline going into it, did you find you had to focus more on nutrition side, training side, or was it just a combination of forming correct habits and then it all fell into place after? Or how did it look for you?
Yeah, because I played football, the workout habit was already formed. That was easy for me. It It was more so the nutrition of just being conscious. And most people don't want to hear this, but it was as simple as tracking my calories and making sure that I was consistently in a deficit. Because when you are, a decent amount overweight, like I probably had 70 pounds or so to lose total, it came off pretty quick once I started actually tracking it and putting myself in a consistent deficit. And I think those like initial wins gave me that momentum of like, okay, if I just keep hitting my numbers, I'm going to get there. And at the time, I didn't have so many mental tools to use, but what I did was I just tried to continue to visualize what it would be like to have the type of health that would make me feel my best. I'm still 21 at the time when I start this transformation. So it's more so like, how do I want to be perceived by women? What's going to make me feel confident? And that really was my driver at the time. So I just visualized what would it feel like. I'd never had a six pack before. And at the time, that was a really important thing for me. I grew up seeing, I used to like pro wrestling. I see these guys with six pack and, I'd see all these guys who are super fit, grew up loving Arnold Schwarzenegger, all that. So I'd be like, is this possible? And so I just kept visualizing getting there and stepping into the identity. And it was honestly just to keep me consistent, that vision of the identity that I wanted. And then, just tracking my calories. I know nobody wants to hear this, but if you just hit your deficit consistently, right, that's really the name of the game.
What's really interesting, I'm going to park it for later because I do want to come back to stepping into a new identity and beliefs and how they shape reality, because I know they're key focus points in the book. And fitness and weight loss can sometimes be as simple as just track your calories, get into a deficit. Yeah. But a lot of people struggle because of belief systems that they have, or an ability to step into that new identity, which is somebody that's 50 pounds less or weighs 20 kilos less than you currently do. So I'm going to park that for now and come back to it. Brandon, I came across you twice before this conversation. This is our first time speaking properly, but I saw or heard you mentioned on Joe Rogan. I think it was Sean Brady that was on Joe Rogan. So it came across on Joe Rogan. I think you have this linked on your Instagram as well. And also you have a link in with Vayner Sports, and you're the mental performance coach there.
Yep.
So I've came across you twice, because as soon as the name came up, I was like, I recognize that name. I've came across this guy. I was like, yes, let's have a chat in the conversation in a podcast together. But so that is going to be a little bit of an anchor for people for the work that you're doing in the grander scheme. But before we get into two things you can control, which I think gives us a beautiful foundation for the rest of this conversation around mindset in particular, talk to us first about what mental coaching is, because mental performance coach, people might have heard of weight loss coaches, personal trainers, even life coaches. Talk to us about what mental coaching is, and we'll use that, and then we'll talk about things that you can control and your focus choices, etc.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And trust me, I'm working with all these professional athletes now. Most of these people have never done anything like this before. They come to me, especially like young men, for example. I think women can be a little more conscious, more aware of their feelings, more open to go into this. But a lot of guys have never touched anything like this. So they also confuse it with like, is this therapy? Is this counseling? Are you a psychologist? And it's actually so different from all those things, right? I would say that men's performance coaching probably is closer to having like a fitness coach, whereas you have a concrete goal. You say, hey, I'm here starting and I want to get to here when I finish, right? And maybe it's an infinite game. Once I get there, I want to stay there. Maybe if it's a weight loss goal, but very similarly in mental performance coaching, it's like, I'll do an intake with someone. I'll get an idea of where they are and all the different aspects of their life. Like, how does it feel to be them, their mental well-being, and then the other things that contribute to it, right? So where are you at financially? Are you satisfied with your career? Where your relationships at, right? Romantically, your tribe, your work relationships, and where's your physical health? Because all those things play into it, right? If any of those are dip down super low, it's gonna mess with your overall mental health, and you're gonna struggle to do whatever it is that you do. So I work with a lot of pro athletes. It's like, if a guy's having all these issues with his girlfriend, it's actually gonna take away from his ability to even like throw a baseball, for example. And so all that to say, to bring it back, is mental performance coaching is coaching to get you to feel your best so you can just fulfill your potential in whatever your given discipline is. And it's very concrete. We're getting you from A to B. I always ask my guys, I'm like, if we could create one clear outcome, what would that be for you? And then we move towards that, and we also try to do it in a specific timeline. And that's also a big difference between therapy is very much dealing with the past. They're like, let me hear all the stories of the past. I don't deal with the past. When I work with clients, I deal with the present, because the present is the only thing that's real. And a lot of people want to be like, well, I have to tell you the story of the past. Well, we can talk about the programming that you have from the past, but the past is dead. You're actually carrying that into the present moment. So that's why even if all these terrible traumas that happened to you are now affecting you in the present moment, it's not because of the past. It's because you're holding a programming almost like scar tissue from that past event. So that's why it's very different from therapy. We don't touch the past. And it's different from counseling because I'm not going to give you advice like a counselor would, because I believe that you, as the performer, as the individual, as the star of the show, has all the answers within. So I'm always just trying to be here as a mirror for the person to find the deeper wisdom from within.
What's really interesting there, Brandon, you have a reel on the link between injury and mental stress. And we're not going to unpack that here, but just to link in that you can't compartmentalize your life. And this is something that I had a misconception in my 20s. I thought I could put relationships into one bracket, into a silo, into a compartment. Fitness went into another, business went into another, and it was basically segmented in different parts of my life. As opposed to actually, if you're having a bad relationship or you're really stressed out at work, that impacts your gym performance and that impacts your performance at work, and it has all these crossovers. And the same way as when you reduce stress in other areas of your life and you're feeling more driven towards whatever your mission is or towards your goal or towards your outcome, that can have a positive benefit everywhere. So you can't compartmentalize this. And again, I'm speaking to a focus group of one here because I thought you could. I literally thought you could put everything into different brackets, different silos, and that they didn't impact one another, when actually they really do. And you mentioned their clear outcome and specific timeline, which I think is so clear for any goal that you set, whether that's weight loss, building muscle, getting stronger, getting faster, setting up a business, whatever it is, having a clear outcome and a specific timeline. Which brings me on to another reel that you did, and I know you talked about surrendering to the present moment in this clip, but about the 2 things you can control. Talk to us a little bit about this, because if you're not following this and you haven't adopted this mindset, you are really going to be at a disadvantage for having any clear goal or outcome that you're looking to achieve. So talk to us about the only 2 things that we can control.
Oh, yeah, brother. When I learned this for the first time, what a relief it was. God, carrying around so much before I learned this. You know, because in the daily basis, so many people deal with overwhelm because they just believe there's so many things they need to control, where the truth is there's only 2 things, like you said. Your focus. So where's your mind directed in the present moment? And then your choices. What are you doing in the present moment? And there's been a lot of, amazing quotes from people who have said this in many different ways. You can just control your mind and your decisions. You can say it a lot of different ways, but everyone is getting back to the same thing, which is that as a human being, in every moment, there's only 2 things that we could possibly control. It's where is our mind being focused, because what you focus on is what you're going to get. So when you focus on what you don't want, you get more of what you don't want. We all know how that goes. It's a downward spiral. But the same way, when you focus on what you want, you get more of what you want. It's an upward spiral. So what you focus on is what you get. And it's very different from positive thinking, though. That's what I want everyone to grasp. We're not talking about positive thinking. We're talking about focusing on what you want. So there is a big distinction there, all right? It's just, think about it this way. It's like everyone understands this for their choices. You understand that when you eat cookies every single day and you eat more cookies than maybe you should be eating, there's going to be an outcome of you are going to gain weight, right? We all understand that. But we don't really think about the compound effect of our focus. When you focus on what you don't want all the time, you can expect to feel how you don't want all the time, and those feelings will lead to the habits that you participate with, because if you don't feel good, you probably don't want to do habits that take any form of discipline, right? You need to feel like intrinsic drive to take action. So your focus really feeds everything else in your life.
With focus, I think it layers perfectly. I think you've said that so beautifully for people, because your focus and what you put your mind on is what expands effectively, whether that's good, bad, indifferent. But then the choices you make, whether it's tracking your calories, deciding you're making a non-negotiable to work out 3, 4, 5 times a week, whether it's to, if it's writing a book or setting up a business, you're doing a little bit every day that's progressively moving. Every day, one of my mentors said this to me years ago, and I still come back to it, that every day we're moving a little bit closer or a little bit further away from our goal based on the choices we make. And you're not going to get every day right, nor do you have to, especially with something like weight loss or fat loss. Like if you do it 80% of the time, you're going to get great results with that. Same as with business, as long as you're showing up more often than not. But ultimately, you can control your choices. You can't control what other people say. You can't control what other people do. You can't control the social media algorithms. You can't control X, Y, or Z. So many things. That list is endless. But you can control your choices and you can control your focus. And I think it layers nicely onto our beliefs and how they shape reality. Talk to us a little bit, because I know this is touched on in the book where you talk about power versus force.
Yeah.
But belief shaping our reality is so important. And I don't want to go too woo and out there for people, because sometimes people are like, oh, just give me the pragmatic steps that I can take. But when you layer the fact that focus and choices and then beliefs come on top of that, I think it makes it a little bit more tangible for people. Talk to us a little bit about belief shaping reality.
Absolutely. So what we have to understand is that discipline and try hard and effort it's way more built up than we give it way more credit than it actually deserves, because if it was just about trying harder, being more disciplined, like everyone would get the same results, right? We would all be rich and happy and lean and healthy. Like everyone wants the same thing. So it's not about effort, right? So it's not about effort, then what is it? What drives our focus from beneath the surface? What drives our actions from beneath the surface? It's our beliefs, right? And there's really nothing woo-woo about this. This is just how the human organism works, right? There's this external world. There's all this data coming in. It's passing through one of your five senses. You see, hear it, smell it, taste it, touch it. And then what gives the external world meaning? It's your beliefs. It's as simple as that, because your beliefs create the perception in the present moment. There's just so much data out there that actually most of what our beliefs do is they delete, distort, and generalize the world so you can actually make sense of what's happening in the present moment. It's mostly going, let's get rid of everything else and just only make what you believe to be true so we can actually make sense of reality. And so it's more like a deletion, a distortion, a generalizing mechanism than anything else. And which makes it make so much sense when you think about like, yeah, well, why did I do that? Well, because I believed that that was going to be in my best interest, even if rationally everything would tell me otherwise. And so I'll give you an example, especially, we haven't got into this yet, but I built a really big fitness company, on my way to being able to be a full-time mental performance coach with athletes and entrepreneurs. And what I'd see all the time would be, especially mothers or women who are responsible for kids. They would say, you know what? I so desperately want to be consistent with my workout habit. But when we would dig into their subconscious, we find out that they believed that if they spent more time working out, they would have less time for their kids. So what's a mother going to do? Every time she's going to choose her children over herself. That's just built into moms. That's just who they are evolutionarily. And so as long as they believe that working out means less time, less energy, less effort with the kids, they're going to delete that possibility that they can work out. And then when you ask them about it rationally, they're going to be like, oh, I just don't have time for it. Where they could create time, but they're deleting, distorting, and generalizing their reality, right? And so that's what people do all the time. They're just limiting their opportunities and possibilities based upon the beliefs that they're holding at the subconscious level.
That's a great example. I think I've worked with so many females and mothers in the last decade who have that belief system coming in, and I would always tell them you can't give from an empty cup. That you have to be able to fill up your cup, whether that's working out, eating well. That will give you more energy, that will make you more present with your kids, and you'll be able to show up in a better way. And that one reframe can shift a belief system that can be hardwired and programmed for years in a lot of people. And as you mentioned, it's shifting the way you see it, the fitness habit, the workout habit, and actually doing it for your kids as opposed to it taking time away from your children. Again, a lot of these things are just shifting the beliefs. I want to pull back. This is a little bit of a side tangent, but I am going to come back because I love that phrase, delete, distort, and generalize. And something that really changed my life probably about 7 or 8 years ago, was when I started to come across some of the cognitive biases. Confirmation bias was a big one for me, that will confirm their best loved beliefs, i.e., if you believe that one fitness program is the best, you're going to confirm and consume information that supports that, and you're going to delete everything that doesn't. When you came across that delete, distort, and generalization, was there any, and I won't say specific cognitive biases, but just in your own life, Brandon, I won't say belief systems either, because that's not the correct terminology, but thinking systems or mental models that serve you more than any other when I bring that up? A left field question, I know, but I was just curious as you were speaking, it came into my head.
I just want to take a moment and sit into it and to see what came up for me before responding. And what comes up for me is that I guess I have this visual. If people even wanted to close their eyes, if you can close your eyes, you can imagine this. I really don't think that much, as funny as that might sound. I more imagine that I'm living in this inner world, this inner planet. And if I feel good, then I imagine like this inner world I live on is just like a beautiful place. It's like, flowing clean rivers and beautiful forests. And it's just a beautiful place of nature that I want to be. And then if I feel bad, I just imagine it's almost like trash and pollution. That's just like, there's garbage dumped everywhere in my beautiful nature. And so then I go into myself and I go, well, I don't feel good with that. There's only one of two things happening. Either I'm acting out of alignment with the man I want to be, and so I need to deal with that. But more often than not, I'm holding a belief that's irrational that's making me suffer. And that's more so how I deal with these things. I don't really think. Instead, just everything in my life is filtered through feeling. So if I can feel good and I'm present, then I just operate, I move, I flow, I just go. And then if I don't feel good, then I try to find where is that trash at, and it lives physically in the body. And I find that women are a lot better at finding this in their body than men. Men can absolutely do it, but it's almost like a sixth sense for women. It comes more naturally too, because they're more intuitive, right? They're more in touch with the yin energy, the feminine, the receiving, where they can actually feel, and we can all feel. I do this. You feel into your body, you go, okay, I don't feel good. Where does that physically live in my body? I'm feeling in my upper stomach. What does that feel like? Oh, it feels like anxiety. Why am I feeling anxious? And you feel into it. Feeling anxious, and then maybe a thought pops into that. Well, I'm feeling anxious because I believe I'm not doing enough. Oh, I'm not doing enough. Where's that coming from? And maybe like your kids flashing your head or something, or a relationship, and I believe I'm not doing enough in this relationship. And then you look at the rational facts, you're like, I'm doing more than enough. Right? And then you see how you're creating your own suffering based off of this belief you're holding. And where does that belief come from? Well, maybe it's just been put in you a long time ago. You never even chose it. And there's nothing you could actually ever do rationally to feel like you are doing enough. And so you're suffering unnecessarily. And so, Brian, I know you're asking about like, what is my mental framework that I use? And for me, I don't really go in the head too much. I don't really use mental frameworks. I really do everything through feeling for myself. I'm constantly auditing my own inner world, my own inner planet. And if I'm in the present and I'm peaceful and I'm flowing, then I'm good. And if I notice there's a piece of trash, I just try my best to clean it up. In that way, I just illustrated.
That's really helpful. Something I've been trying to work on over the last 2 years is getting a lot more in tune with my body. I read The Body Keeps the Score several years ago, and that book was just like somebody unlocked a door to everything that was going on in my body. So I highly recommend that one as well for people who are similar. We are trying to get, just particularly for, I won't say just for men, because women get massive benefit from that book too, and all the other genders, but men particularly, as you mentioned, can struggle with this because of just a different energy. We're a bit more, yang, go. Not always. You've got women in polarity and feminine energies and masculine energies merging, but for me, I found it really beneficial. And you've given me kind of an unintentional segue, because you mentioned there about suffering unnecessarily. And I want to talk about stepping into a new identity, because something that was a massively unserving belief system for me was an identity as an anxious person. I had struggled terribly in my 20s, a little bit in my early 30s, but I was getting a good grasp of it by the time I turned 30, with anxiety and mental health issues in general. But I also had the belief system that the anxiety served me. I thought that the more anxious I am, the story was the more I'll get done and the more external success I'll have. So I really battled and forced it and used everything to try and remove that, when actually I did, ironically, surrendering to it was actually when you feel it, you can heal it, or when you resist it, it persists. But that new identity, it started for me with deciding I don't want to be an anxious person anymore. This isn't serving me anymore. This old belief system is flawed and broken, and I attach to it, and it's actually making me miserable now. And I had external successes in my 20s, and I've had it in my 30s. I got it in my 20s and it was fueled by that. I've had it in my 30s and it was fueled by a lot more peace and service and other more higher frequency things like gratitude and service through whatever videos or podcasts, etc. I create. Talk to us about stepping into a new identity, because if you're someone who's trying to lose weight, or someone who's trying to adopt a fitness habit or a workout habit, or somebody who's trying to build or grow a business, a side hustle, you're a teacher, you work in an office, but you actually want to work in Pilates or yoga or fitness or mindset because that's where your real life passion is and that's where your pull is, but you struggle because your identity is wrapped in the old you. Talk to us about stepping into a new identity and the importance of that.
Yeah. I feel like it's more a removing of the barriers that are preventing you from being in that identity. Because if that's truly your inspiration, if that's who you feel like you are, then there's nothing to become. That's who you are, there's nothing to become. So instead of thinking of it as like this external identity you have to step into it, just view it more so like, well, this is who I am, and now I need to remove all the barriers or hold me back from revealing this. Kind of like masks, like we're always wearing these masks, like, even me right now, I'm wearing some mask, and that's the goal, is like, how can you continue to remove these barriers that hold you back from just being who you truly are? And so the first step in that is like, okay, if something is inspiring for you, if you want to go take a next step, maybe you want to go into a career, or you want to create a physical health transformation, then feel into what is the resistance that comes up around that. Health is one that we're all very familiar with. So if you use the example of like, okay, someone knows that they're going to be just feeling much better after 30 pounds less, right? They just 30 pounds of fat they should probably cut out. And they imagine, okay, that's the identity, because that is a true them, right? We're not supposed to be so fucking fat. That's not natural, right? When they show all these like videos of people in the 1920s, when they sort of started to get videos, and you look around, you're like, there's no obesity, like this doesn't exist. Like, we're not supposed to be like this. Our true selves are healthy. Our true selves are not self-medicating with food, which is what a lot of people do. Like, that's how you get to be overweight. It's just simple as it is. You're suppressing something within yourself. You feel lonely, and you're filling that hole with food. Just a fact. And so what is that core feeling of loneliness that needs to be filled with food? And can we address that immediately? Ooh. And it could be a lot of things, right? It's like, maybe it's a relationship you shouldn't be in. Ooh. Maybe you're self-medicating because you shouldn't be in that relationship anymore. Maybe it is your career, right? I don't know, maybe you're a stay-at-home mom, but then you want to be pursuing your career and you're self-medicating yourself to be at home. Or maybe it's the other way. Maybe you're forcing yourself to work 60-hour work weeks when you want to be at home with the kids, right? And so your way of self-medicating with the food. So we're talking about some deep, deep spiritual work here that needs to be done for someone to reveal who they truly are. And who you truly are is just someone who's aligned, who just feels good in the present moment. If you do, it's easy to eat healthy. It's easy to take the right healthy habits. It's easy to show up and do the work that needs to be done. It's actually your natural way of being when you're aligned.
Very interesting you mentioned there, because loneliness, and there's other different potential emotional undertones when it comes to self-medicating with food. I've had a few of them myself. Loneliness actually ironically was one of them, but I also have self-medicated with exercise. Ironically, as a fitness person, some fitness people will self-medicate on the other extreme, as opposed to turning purely to food. They'll go to exercise to self-medicate because they're feeling unfulfilled. I used to work full-time as a primary school teacher, elementary school teacher, and it wasn't my calling. It was very out of alignment with what I was supposed to be doing in this world. And as a result, I completely self-medicated with a little bit of food, but also excessive exercise, because I just felt like this isn't what I'm supposed to be doing. It was the only thing that made me feel better. And there was other stages in my life when it was drugs and it was alcohol. But that misalignment and a constant desire where you feel this void inside that you need to fill it with something, whether that's a person in a relationship, whether that's a fitness goal that's excessive for you, or whether that's food or drugs or alcohol. This shows up in different ways. It's not what you do, it's why you do it. If you feel there's a void inside, you're the only one that can fill that void by bringing yourself back into alignment with whatever it is that you want. I break my life into health, wealth, love, and fulfillment, those 4 quadrants, and then just checking in regularly to make sure that everything is being filled so that I'm able to stay in that alignment path and I'm not falling off with drugs, alcohol, excessive exercise, all these things and traps that can, hit any of us at any stage in life, depending on where we're at. But I want to go and touch on rewiring focus, because we did touch on it earlier. And you have in the book about rewiring your focus to get what you want. That's the section in the book that I think is really potent and really helpful for people. I want to start early on that, Brandon, a 0 to 1 for people for rewiring their focus to get what they want. Because a lot of us, focus group of 1, an old version of me struggled to know what I wanted. I had a kind of a vague and a broad idea of what kind of relationship I wanted to be in, what kind of life I wanted to live, what kind of business I might want to run, but I wasn't very clear on it. It wasn't a clear outcome, and I didn't have any specific timeline like we talked about earlier. It was very broad. So I struggled going from 0 to 1. I actually found once I was on the path and I had what I call my ladder up against the right wall, it was very easy to climb it, but I struggled to know what wall I wanted to put that ladder up against. For someone who doesn't and isn't 100% sure on what they want, and they want to rewire their focus so they can get what they want, how would you recommend they go from 0 to 1?
Yeah. And I'll also say that rewiring your focus is part of the journey to be able to get to the deeper subconscious programs, because when you start to rewire your focus, it's just you taking ownership over your mind, right? Most people have so many invasive thoughts. And so let me just start by saying that, like, this isn't the end game, but this is a step on the journey to getting to the deeper stuff. And it's empowering yourself to understand that you can actually choose your focus. It is possible. You just have to bring intention to it. And it's like a muscle, and you can build it stronger the more that you use it. And so instead of trying to focus on an outcome, instead I'd focus on how you want to feel, right? I think we can all get on board with that. It's just like, well, how do I want to feel? Because so many people are like, I don't know what I want in life. I want this, I want that. I think I know what I want. Well, you probably know more or less how you want to feel, right? Like, I want to feel peaceful. I want to feel loved. I want to feel some novelty, some variety in my life, excitement, connection, fulfillment. So you can ask yourself, all right, well, what would my focus need to look like to bring me back to those feelings? And so an exercise I give people is first starting by recognizing the feelings you have consistently. That's like step 1 is set some alarms in your phone to go off every few hours and just ask you, how does it feel to be you right now? Then you can gain the awareness of like, okay, I have awareness. I know how I feel. So now you can see the alarm go off and you're like, I know how it feels when I feel good, right? I'm feeling peaceful. I like this. I want more of this. I'm feeling excited. I want more of this. I'm feeling angry. I'm feeling anxious. Okay, I don't really like this, right? So that's kind of step 1, even before you start rewiring your focus, is like getting that awareness of your feelings, what you like, what you don't like. And once you know the feelings you want to experience more of, you can take the next step of doing the alarms again, but then noticing, well, where's your focus going right before that feeling emerges? So you're just noticing, okay, before I just noticed I'm feeling anxious. What was I focused on right before I started feeling anxious? Oh, I'm focused on how, if all these things happen, I might not have enough money to pay my rent or pay my mortgage 6 months, a year, 2 years down the road. Oh, well, that makes sense. So I'm focusing on what I don't want. Okay, let's not do that, right? Let's focus on what I do want. I'm focusing on so you start to focus on how I have more than enough money right now. Okay, I feel released. And now I feel that peace again instead of anxiety. So the way you rewire your focus is step 1, you bring awareness to the feelings that you have. Step 2, you start to make that connection between how your focus is feeding your feelings. And then step 3, when you notice yourself feeling bad, just flip the focus and you're going to feel good again. And that's a skill in itself, right? When people first start this, they're like, how could I ever flip this? For me, it's a very matter of fact, 'cause I've been doing it so long, but it's a skill that you'll get better with the time. Like sometimes it's very obvious. It's like, well, I'm focusing on I don't have enough money right now, so I feel so anxious. So I'm like, well, why don't you focus on how you do have more than enough money for the things that are present, right? I don't have enough money to buy a Lamborghini right now, so I feel anxious. What if you focus on how you had more than enough money for your car that you do have and the food in your fridge and the roof over your head? Oh, I feel grateful, right? And maybe those feelings of gratitude and peace will get you to that Lamborghini if that's something that you truly want. But like you said, there is no reason to suffer in the in-between time.
It's so interesting. I'm going to add on to that, Brandon, because something that really helps me is separating the story from the actual reality. And you mentioned money there, which is going to sound like I always sound like an absolute dickhead when I give this as an example, because I'm very, very fortunate with the living that I make. I don't have to worry about money and haven't in a very long time. But I have programming around scarcity with money because of the way I was brought up. Didn't have an awful lot of money growing up. Didn't know what to do with it when I did get it. There was a lot of self-sabotaging behaviors in my mid-20s when I started to make a lot of money when I set up my own business. And I still get bouts of anxiety around it. And the reality and the story don't line up at all, because the story is scarcity. I don't have enough. I didn't have enough when I was younger. I didn't have enough when I was a teenager. We didn't have enough. I don't have enough. I don't have enough. Lack and scarcity. When the reality is you have fucking more than enough. I'm blessed with that side of things. And sometimes the anxiety is sitting in the middle and you just have to skew it one side to the other and go, well, actually, this isn't, I shouldn't be feeling this. And again, a lot of people have it around their body image as well, where they think I need to be leaner or I need to be more muscular, or I need to lose more weight. When in reality, well, actually, you probably look really good. Like I've had a lot of women I've worked with who think, well, actually, I just need to lose 10 more pounds. And sometimes I'll ask them, well, why? They're like, well, just, there's other people that are skinnier than me or leaner than me. I'm like, okay, well, are you happy with how you look? It's like, well, not really. Is your partner happy? And they're like, well, yeah, they think I'm gorgeous. They think I'm really sexy. And it's like, okay, well, there's a disconnect here between the reality and the story for people in your life, how they see you and how you see yourself. And sometimes you have to separate that reality and separate that story so that you can at least figure out, well, actually, should I be feeling this emotion? I'm not disregarding any emotion. You feel what you feel because that's how we're conditioned. But sometimes it can send you in a spiral, an anxiety spiral or a scarcity spiral or a I need more spiral, when in reality, you might actually be in a really good position. And one of my friends used to always tell me that if you put all your problems into a circle with 1,000 other people, you wouldn't be long taking yours back. And I think it's a good way to navigate and work through life. I'm curious, Brandon, because vision, working through your subconscious programming, getting clarity around the clear outcomes, these are all things that you go through in the second part of the book, the playbook, where you actually talk about the ego death, awakening your awareness and everything in between. And this might be a difficult question to ask or answer because of all the work you've done yourself and professionally with others. But if I said to you, what was the biggest thing you've changed your mind about in the last decade? What comes to your mind and why?
God. I didn't grow up with any spirituality really in my life, and also just grew up like my mom was an atheist, my dad was Jewish, but never heard him speak about God, and it wasn't particularly religious. It was more like a cultural thing, just 100% Ashkenazi Jews, so it's just like in you more than anything. And so God was not something I grew up with. And then I was in a very liberal town where I went to high school. It's almost like religion was looked down upon. And so I was very just turned off by the idea of God because of all of like the stories that I've heard about him, how I was programmed to think about God. And like you were speaking to just briefly there, like when I went through an awakening experience and had an ego death, I was able to connect into the field and for the first time in my life experience God. And it was undeniable. It was just an experience of connected to everything. And it's just like a deep knowing in my bones that, oh, okay, we can call God, call it the universe, call it the source, call it Allah, whatever you want. But it's undeniable that this whole thing is coming from somewhere and it's going somewhere, and we're just a part of it. We're an expression of it. And that, I think, also for me gave me tremendous relief to be able to surrender. We're talking about the only things that are in my control, focus and choices. Well, what do I do with everything else? I surrender it to God.
It's really interesting because we've lived similar parallel lives on that. As somebody that grew up Catholic, Irish Catholic, and God up until 27, 28, I had a visceral response when somebody would mention God or Jesus or religion. I'm like, oh, fuck no. Like, just get that away from me. And as I've progressed through my life with different experiences, and you can put God, universe, source, universal power, whatever language you want to put in it, as the synonym basically for the same thing. But when you're able to lean into that, it does take a lot of that pressure off. And weirdly, when I started to understand but also embody that I get to make choices. One of my friends told me, and I'll never forget the line, that we're like chess pieces on the board. We get to move one piece and then the whole universe moves around us. And that belief system takes a lot of self-imposed pressure off, takes a lot of self-imposed anxiety off. And then you switch your focus to, okay, well, I'm going to get one go on this life, one go on this as far as I know. I want to live life in alignment. I want to do the things I want to do. And it can be a bit of a wake-up call when you realize, oh, fuck, I hate my job. Or a question I ask regularly, if this was the only relationship I got to be in for the rest of my life, would I be in it? If this was the only job I got to do for the rest of my life, would I be in it? If this was the only workout regimen or nutritional plan I got to follow for the rest of my life, would I do it? And that can filter out a lot of those misaligned choices that you're making, because if you can't do it for the foreseeable, then maybe your ladder is against the wrong wall and you need to move it. And that can be difficult in itself. But it's just interesting that we've had parallel experiences on that. Probably not, there's no coincidences, so maybe it's not as coincidental as I think. I want to ask one final question, Brandon. Before I do that, I'm going to link up the Instagram page. I'm going to link the book in the description for people, Program to Fail, How to Break Through Your Mental Blocks and Achieve Greatness. So people can give you a follow on there. They can check out the book. It goes through, even just, we touched on bits in this podcast, but you've got this A to Z guide where you talk in part 1 through the story, and then part 2 has the playbook. So I'll link that in the description for people on BrianKeefitness.com, in the show notes, and also in the description for the podcast. Is there anywhere else you'd like to send them before we get on to the last question?
No, that's really it. I think the book is everything, you know. It has a story, you'll understand it viscerally, and like you said, it has a playbook, so people who want to actually go through the process can self-guide themselves. Yeah.
Amazing. Brandon, I have a question, and this was literally the one that came to mind as soon as I heard we were doing this podcast. And you've worked with some of the top athletes in the world. You've helped them, you've guided them, you've worked through some of their hidden programming, you've got them to achieve and supported them on their path to greatness in what they're looking to do. Out of curiosity, as somebody that would be a self-proclaimed peak performance aficionado, I don't know if it's the right word, where I consume a lot of peak performance stuff because I'm always trying to upskill and up-level my game as much as I can in all the areas that I'm passionate about. But I'm very curious, what's a common belief system or thought or habit or characteristic that you see in those top performers that most people in the general population don't have or apply?
Like something that helps them get there, helps them to get to that elite level. It's funny because most of my work with these people is getting rid of what's messing them up now. We don't actually spend so much time on like what got them there, which is funny enough, because for me, I'm just trying to work very efficiently all the time. So I'm like, let me just remove what's not there, what shouldn't be there. So I could tell you everything that holds these people back from being their best, but thinking about a commonality, a belief they hold that gets them to that elite level. Let me feel into that for a moment. Yeah, it's believing they're the best. Like this deep, just like belief in like the best doesn't necessarily even need to be like compared to anyone else, but just like this belief in their self, like I'm the best, you know. And it's like, it really doesn't need to be, well, are you better than them? I'm the best, period. And even if objectively they're not the best at what they do, like they just believe it. And so every one of their habits is constantly chasing, I'm the best. Which means that, talk about identity, like when you believe you're the best, you're going to do whatever it takes to get there. And so these guys, especially like the professional athletes I work with, like you look at their regimen, they're so far from normal. They're so far from normal. What we consider to be normal, they're eons away from that, right? They're dialed with everything. What time they go to sleep at night, what time they're waking up, making sure they get enough sleep, everything they're putting in their body, getting a hyperbaric chamber, working with the mental coach to make sure that their inner world is cleaned up, the supplements, making sure the technical aspect of their skills are doing the best there, dialing it, creating space in their mind where they're not doing a bunch of other things so they can just have the spaciousness to recover and to heal in between games and to focus on the thing that matters. It's just so singular with their focus. They're just very rare people because they believe they're the best. And so all their actions are in alignment with that. And I would say that's a very healthy ego, because the way that, especially the clients that I'm working with are like, they're approaching as like, if I'm working with a UFC fighter, they believe that nobody can beat them. Not because they're just saying, I'm better than him, and him. It's because they just have a very healthy ego that just goes, well, I'm the best. And you need that. Just whatever the objective information is out there, if you're going to go into a fight where you're, kind of like fighting to the death, you need to believe you're the best. And so all these people who are at the elite level, they're really carrying that energy. And like I said, they have these different things that might hold them back that, they work through with me to remove. But at their core, they got there for a reason. They have a healthy ego. And I'd say that's the difference between being egotistical and having a really healthy ego. Is egotistical is like, you need to make sure you're better than someone else. You're always measuring yourself against other people. I'm better than you, I'm better than you, I'm better than you. That's egotistical versus a really big, healthy ego. It's just, I'm the best. I'm the best. And almost in this delusional reality of like, I don't care what information or what other person you could try to compare against me. I'm the best. And really, that's where I think we should all be, because what are we talking about? I'm the best I can be. That's where we're getting at. And so I'd say that's like this overarching belief that just when I sat into it and closed my eyes, it just boom right there. That's just like this through line through all of them that have gotten to them to where they are in the professionals, making millions of dollars, being very rare human beings.
I love that. A great way to wrap it up. I think it's a reality distortion field from Steve Jobs. It's normally attributed to that he's in his own little bubble. And interestingly, I had Rashad Evans on the podcast, who's the former UFC light heavyweight champion, and we were speaking about that, about believing that nobody can beat you. Now, our conversation when talking about functional mushrooms and psilocybin, and we went to completely left field with that episode. But in the beginning, we were speaking about his career and how he showed up that I'm unbeatable. This is the thing that made me successful when I was in the UFC, and then how his chapters of his life changed as he got introduced. And he had an incredible story. I'm sure you're familiar with Rashad, but in terms of his brain damage and how it got reversed with functional mushrooms and the brain scans, and just absolutely incredible. And one of the things that I'm sure in a decade or 2 decades time, people are going to be like, why haven't we been doing this with NFL players like you, Brandon, when you were playing high level football, people that are in the UFC, people who are in contact sports where there's brain injuries, and that there's things out there that we're unaware of that can reverse a lot of those issues. So I think it's a watch the space. I won't speak on it. It's outside my circle of competence, but it's definitely a very, very interesting thing for those who are interested to do a follow-up. Brandon, I can't thank you enough for your time. I think for those who need that mental coaching, they'll get so much from the reels that you put up on Instagram. There's the book, as you mentioned, which goes through the story and everything in a step-by-step guide, which I'll link for them to check out. Keep doing what you're doing, brother, and thank you so much again.
Yeah, brother. My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
That was mental performance coach Brandon Epstein on the weight loss mindset, creating a fitness identity and rewiring your focus to get what you want. Also, this podcast was sponsored by the BKF online program for those of you looking to work with me on your weight loss journey, fat loss journey, or building muscle. If you're male or female, if you train at home, train in the gym, or body weight, there's different versions of the program and coaching with me. The link is in the description below. Thank you so much for listening to this week's podcast. Catch you all next Monday.